My guest today is someone whom I met not in a boardroom, not on a trading floor, not at an industry conference. I met him in the baby play area of the building we both live in. Two fathers, two kids the same age, and somewhere between the building blocks and the soft play mats, we started talking about markets, careers, and what it actually means to build something that lasts. That conversation has been going on ever since, in lifts, in corridors, over family dinners, and today, finally, it's on record. Sagar is an executive director in G10 FX Options Trading at Nomura in London. Over 14 years, he has traded and led teams across four cities across Mumbai, Hong Kong, Singapore, and London, working with some of the world's most sophisticated financial institutions. Before Nomura, he was head of Asia FX Options Trading at Barclays in Singapore, and before that, VP at BAML in Hong Kong. He holds a BTech in Electrical Engineering from IIT Bombay, where he won gold medal, an MBA from IIM Calcutta, where he was a double gold medalist, and a scholarship that took him to the university in Germany. He is also a CFA Level 3 candidate, a speaker on markets and risk. My neighbor, my friend, and one of the sharpest minds I've encountered in 15 years in this industry. Sagar Sambrani, welcome to M&A Station.
Thank you, Himanshu. It's an absolute pleasure to join you on the podcast. The introduction was wonderful, and it sort of gives me a flashback on what I've encountered over the last say 15, 20 years. So thank you for this.
No problem. Let's dive in. IIT Bombay for electrical engineering, then IIM Calcutta with a double gold medal and a scholarship to Germany. That's an extraordinary academic start. Was finance always where you were heading?
Right. So let me sort of dial back to say 20, 25 years back from now. I sort of grew up in a middle class family. While growing up, I think the message overall that I sort of got from society is you have to try to be the best at anything you do. In sort of a fairly populated country like India, where there's a lot of competition going ahead, if you have a good start at life via education, that sort of sets you up, gives you a platform to sort of build on for the next few years. So while maths and physics weren't sort of my favorite subjects growing up, I knew that those tend to have sort of more practical applications going forward, and learning about the IIT JEE and then sort of doing fairly well there, getting a top 50 rank and getting a seat in what I wanted to do, which is electronics at IIT Bombay. I think it was a fairly good start. The move into finance wasn't planned out per se, but in the years where I was at IIT Bombay, which is 2007 to 2011, there was a lot
Mm-hmm.
finance related news that you used to encounter in your daily life, because you obviously had the global financial crisis. You had 300-year-old financial institutions sort of collapsing, getting merged and getting bought out, and the financial derivatives crisis starting from the US eventually sort of affected every single country in the world, right? And various companies, etc. So the overall global outreach of finance became quite interesting to me. That's when I started reading about it, and then it just felt like something I could do for the rest of my life. So that's how I sort of came into finance.
I think you are being very modest by saying that you did fairly well in your career by cracking the likes of IIT Bombay and IIM Calcutta. People are proud if they are either into an IIT or an IIM. Cracking both, I think, is an extraordinary achievement. And that too with a gold medal.
Thank you very much.
You started your career with internship at Deutsche Bank in London back in 2012. What was the experience like as a student who is coming from India, landing in the city of London for the first time?
Well, good memories overall. It was my first trip abroad, so I had a little bit of a cultural shock. It did teach me about sort of multicultural teams, multicultural global teams like the ones I lead now. My previous background obviously was sort of studying in India, which is fairly homogenized.
Hmm.
So while people are coming from different states, etc., eventually it doesn't feel as much of a melting pot as sort of working on a global sort of city center. One thing I can remember was the weather wasn't the best that year, so I wasn't as sure about continuing in the city. But being so close to the home of cricket at Lords, I do have fairly like excellent memories from that time.
And do you think weather has changed for better now in versus 2012?
It's wonderful. I think I came back to London again in 2021, had a lovely summer here, and the last 2 years that I've been here, one really can't complain. This is the best weather in the world.
Of course. Going back to your career, you started your career at RBS in Mumbai before your internship with Deutsche Bank, and that was in fixed income sales. And then you moved into FX trading. How did you find your way into FX options specifically?
Right. So out of university, as I said, I started off with RBS on the fixed income sales side. Lovely colleagues. They taught me my first few things about trading in practical life, as opposed to the theoretical stuff you learn at university.
Hmm.
While I enjoyed the 6 months to a year in sales, it always felt like I was missing out on some of the action that the trading colleagues were getting. Right. Now, what I mean by that is they were, I think, glued in a lot more to markets. They were voicing their thoughts and ideas and getting those ideas tested fairly frequently, as opposed to my time at sales, where I was actually getting clients into trades and not being able to sort of experience the trade volatility myself. So I clearly wanted a shot at trading.
Hmm.
I approached our India head of trading one afternoon post sort of a work event, and I told him about my desire to have a shot at trading. So he sort of learned about my background, etc. He asked me one very important question. He said, "What is the most important thing in trading?" And the first thing that came to my mind is risk management, and that's all I said. And he said, "Yeah, welcome on board." He said, "Welcome on board." So the next month,
Wow.
I started in trading, and I'm quite thankful to him for giving me that opportunity. It's been a wonderful 13, yeah, close to 13 years now in the world of trading, and I have absolutely no regrets for making that move.
And that's a clear example of one correct conversation can unlock so many doors.
Exactly, exactly.
And what did you actually think about markets before joining? And what surprised you the most when you started working in markets?
Well, I was clearly enamored by finance and more so trading when in my first few years. I think I just find the concept of markets very, very interesting. Whichever asset class you look at, whichever location you look at, any era from say the 1600s all the way up to 2026, I think markets eventually dial down to a few fundamental concepts: demand and supply, fear and greed, and how different sort of stakeholders value capital and resources differently. Right. So that's what creates a market, right? Where when any market is effectively an exchange of capital for resource or one resource for the other, right? Eventually, it's not about learning just your asset class. It's also very important to learn about human psychology and how markets behave as a herd. So I think that's what I've spent my time trying to perfect. I think the most surprising thing for me in my sort of 13 to 15-year experience with markets is how frequently you get a reality check. It happens
Hmm.
multiple times on a daily basis, right? So you can do all of the groundwork over the weekend, think about, okay, fine, this is what's going to happen and these are my plans. But it's very important to have a plan B, C, D, E as well, right? I think
Hmm.
even the best of us on average get somewhere between 60 to 70% of our calls right. So we have to eat humble pie quite regularly. Down to the market's always right. You can't really fight it, but just ensure that you survive long enough to be able to enjoy the profitable times.
And tell me how many times in a day or in a week that you have to resort to plan B, C, D, or E.
Well, typically it's like plan A2, A3, then if those things don't work out, then plan B2, B3, etc. Right? So we have sort of multiple fallbacks, but it's most important to sort of get an idea of your emotional state, right? Because if you get swayed by emotions, then even the best of
Yeah,
plans can fall apart,
yeah.
right? So if you can size your positions correctly, not get drawn in by the greed element, and have their size in such a way that you're not having to resort to the fear side as well, then I think you can have a fairly long career in markets.
So keeping emotions out is extremely important.
It's very, very important. I think one of my idols for the world of trading or just in terms of how to manage life is MS Dhoni.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. In the sense he's been through situations far trickier than most of us have had to manage on a daily basis or even in our lives. And it's just the equanimity with which he handles either defeat or victory. I've rarely ever come across anyone as sort of sanguine about difficult situations as him. So he's an absolute legend.
Now that we are talking about MS Dhoni, if we go back in time and think about that 2007 match, India, Pakistan, it was a tiebreaker. And he did very unconventionally, came up with bowlers. Rather, he came up with batters
Yeah.
for the tiebreaker. Do you think that was planned?
Not really. I think while it's very, very important for him to win, his policy effectively is at the end of the day, it's a game, right? So you need to
Hmm.
enjoy what you're doing. If
Yeah.
you add additional stress and try to stick to too many rules, then the rules are playing you rather than you playing the game and the rules, right? So he tends to hold these wild cards up his sleeves. And even if you look at the other unconventional moves that he's enacted on the cricket field, it clearly shows that he takes the game far more lightly and treats it as a sport rather than something that can completely change his life and the most important thing in his life. So it's easy to say, easy to talk about, but extremely difficult to sort of implement on a daily basis.
Yeah, of course. Moving back to trading, FX options trading is a niche place in finance. How would you explain this to someone outside the markets world?
Right. So let's break it down into FX or a foreign exchange and then touch on the options part later. So I think among the different asset classes that are commonly trading, which is equities, credit, commodities, rates, and FX, I think the equities asset class and foreign exchange are probably the most easy to understand or intuitive for a general person. Foreign exchange effectively deals with global currencies and how they are valued versus each other. Foreign exchange, I think, is critical to support global trade because the world is a global village right now, right? So China is potentially one of the largest manufacturers in the world. US tends to be one of the largest consumers in the world. Again, this differs from commodity to commodity, asset class to asset class, but facilitate the global trade, it is very important to have a functioning foreign exchange market that operates 24 by 5, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
The largest asset class by daily volume traded and very important, as I said. Now, for FX options or foreign exchange options is a derivative of foreign exchange that provides higher customizability in terms of the outcome and final payoff. So let's take an example of you and me dealing in foreign exchange, right? So you sell me pound sterling and I give you US dollars at the market implied rate. So that happens on an immediate basis or on a 1 or 2 day basis. Suppose you are a corporate that is expecting dollar inflows over the course of the next 3 years,
Hmm.
right? Every quarter. And you don't want movements in the rate of the pound versus the dollar to affect your annual reports, etc. So you want to hedge for these inflows, right? With for something like foreign exchange options that a bank will quote for you, you get to remove the entire risk of your potential inflows to the bank for a certain
Yeah.
charge,
Yeah.
right? Different banks quote different prices for these things, and banks are market makers, so they are always quoting you a buying price and a selling price for any set of options or an option structure that you need to hedge your risks. So that's basically how a market is created. And in my role as a senior FX options market maker, I am the point of contact for corporates, for hedge funds, for sovereign wealth funds, for insurance companies, pension funds, etc., to be
Hmm.
able to hedge their risk on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. And we quote options from an overnight basis for suppose to hedge an overnight risk, all the way up to 10 year, 20 or 30 years as well. So we are providing liquidity in markets for them to be able to hedge their risks.
Okay. And which currencies are you dealing with?
So I look at all the G10 currencies, which is basically the currencies of the G10 countries, which are the most important or the largest financial countries in the world. Before this, when I was at Barclays, I was an expert in the emerging markets Asia FX options. So that was, say, China, India, Indonesia, Korea, Taiwan, etc.
Great. On similar theme, someone who has never been on trading markets floor. Trading is always glorified by Bollywood movies, Hollywood movies. You see movies like Wolf of Wall Street, where they show trading in such a different way. How would you tell viewers of those movies what is it actually in reality?
Right. Yeah, that's a fair point. I think every time I watch one of these movies, it seems much more exciting and yeah, it seems a lot more exciting than what an actual trading floor job is.
Hmm.
So in these movies, they sort of depict traders as cowboys taking really large trades based on gut feel, etc. Right, and then
Yeah.
and then there's big disasters lying ahead, and then somehow it turns into the best trade of their lives. We do have obviously a few days like this where which are fairly volatile, and the PNL does swing quite rapidly. But I think on a day-to-day basis, it's not taking very large punts based on gut feel. It's more about risk management and risk engineering, right?
Mm-hmm.
As market makers, you are you are always quoting prices out to clients in extremely large size of FX options in a fairly volatile market, and you're competing with 10 to 12 other banks on all of these prices. So the margins tend to be quite thin, and they have been reducing over the course of the last 15 years that I've been in trading. With these slim margins, your job effectively is to provide clients the best service and also net sort of earn money for the firm as a trader,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So the way we do that is when I quote a price to a client and the client trades with me, they are transferring a significant amount of risk onto my portfolio,
Of
right?
course.
And they have got the hedge. Now it's my job to sort of manage this risk along with the rest of the entire portfolio. So we do always trade on a portfolio basis rather than a single trade basis, right? Because the portfolio is what you need to manage. It's eventually about, once you look at your portfolio, which tends to have millions and millions of trades, right? You tend to break this down into a set of factors which can affect your PNL, right? So we call
Mm-hmm.
them Greeks effectively, right? So you have Vega, Rega, Sega, Delta, etc. Once you look at those Greeks, you need to understand or take views on what might work, what is hedgeable, etc., and hedge out those specific Greeks to the best of your abilities. Right? Hedge, you can
Yeah.
hold some of
Yeah.
them, you can increase
Yeah.
the size of some of them, and certain elements that you don't want because the client has wanted the hedge in the first place. Those are the ones you try to hedge out in the markets. So that's broadly what, say, 70 to 80% of trading is all about. Understanding the inherent risks on one trade, understanding your portfolio to the best possible ability, and then trying to monetize those. So I think that's
Mm-hmm.
effectively what trading is. And if you can do that well, then you can have a fairly successful career.
Of course. And you have a fairly long career. Is there a trade or a moment in your career which you think taught you the most?
Well, I think we tend to have a fair few of these. Trading is about learning, unlearning, relearning very, very, very frequently, right? So what
Yeah.
might
Yeah.
work extremely well pre-COVID, post-COVID in a completely different market environment, it has really changed the outlook, right? So I wouldn't say there's one moment per se, but every single time, I think the important thing that I've learned is about sort of mean reversion, right? That cycles, the markets tend to trade in cycles, and your life will also sort of move in cycles, right? So you might be having the most glorious run either in trading or in life, but then one trigger here and there can completely change your life, right? So it's important to be humble when things are working out, and
Mm-hmm.
important to be courageous when things aren't working out very well, right? So I'll give you an example. So say let's say it's 2017. I'm having a beautiful year. Most things are working. I'm getting a promotion, getting paid well, and my calls are going well. So the reputation is also doing well. And then something might happen in 2018, either one market incident or one tends to get slightly go with the flow and take extremely large risks, and that can completely change your your trajectory for the next month. And then if you one bad trade tends to follow another, right?
Yeah.
And then you might just go into a cycle where for the next 3 to 6 months, things just don't work out. And it's quite uncanny how you can have a really terrible run for 2 to 3 months where all of the things where you've thought deeply, they just don't work out, right? And then you might have a beautiful run again after that. So always know that there's a good cycle coming at some stage and potentially a few bad cycles also after that. So it's important to take both in your stride and ensure that the emotions that you sort of feel on your trading career, etc., come back to do not come back to sort of rule your life outside of work as well.
Fair
So
enough.
just adding one example on that, there was this one incident in I believe it was 2019.
Mm-hmm.
We had a really large trade that should have worked out, but for some reason didn't work out. I came back home fairly stressed, and my wife, she asked me what happened. So I said, right. So this could have worked out, would have been the best thing for our year, would have finished our year on a high, etc. But things didn't work out, right? So I'm quite stressed about that. What will happen in the future to my career, to my team, to the
Yeah. Yeah.
P&L. My wife, who's a doctor and a head and neck surgeon per se, she had a very simple answer. She said, "Okay, fine. Let's assume this one doesn't work out, and the next five don't work out. What's the absolute worst that could happen?"
Mm-hmm.
That, um, well, if things don't happen and then if this continues for a while, then the worst thing that could happen is I could lose my job, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, fine. Now look at my career. I've been conducting multiple surgeries, very significant surgeries on people for a long time. When someone asks me what's the worst that could happen, these are people who might lose their lives. Just imagine the impact on, right? When there's a single breadwinner who's losing his life. So that really put into context how much of a difference there is between the worst outcomes in different scenarios, right?
Yeah, of course.
Since then, anytime I'm stressed about certain scenario or potential outcomes, it just brings my mind back to that that one
Yeah,
discussion, right? In terms of, right, why are we assigning so much importance to a potential outcome which is eventually just numbers on the table, right? And those numbers can swing back to positive as well, right? Whereas if one tends to lose their life or lose a limb or and lose their careers, there are very few comebacks from that. So it's very important to, as I said, right, with MS Dhoni, he treats it something that really won't change your life either side, and that's why he's had such wonderful results.
yeah. I think small perspectives sometimes can change so much in life. You think so much about your career, and then you relate it with someone like your wife. It's irrelevant what we are thinking
Thank
in
you.
a way.
Yeah.
You have traded across Mumbai, Hong Kong, Singapore, and London, four very different market cultures and time zones. What are the most striking differences in how markets actually behave and how trading culture differs across those cities?
Right. Well, so I think Mumbai is slightly different in the sense it's an onshore center, so it tends to
Mm-hmm.
be very India focused, right? 90% plus of anything you trade there will be either related to the Indian rupee or Indian bonds or Indian equities, etc. Right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's very important to get a niche understanding of what's happening in India, right? Breadth doesn't matter as much. Whereas when you look at the offshore centers, which is London, Hong Kong, Singapore, New York as well, and these days even Dubai, they tend to focus more on breadth, right?
Okay.
So, for example, if you are sitting in London, say I'm an expert on the euro dollar, right? So I'm
Yeah.
expert on euro and anything that happens in that broad environment. If it's a quiet year for euro and all of the activity is in some other currencies, then I it doesn't really give me the opportunity to monetize that, right? So breadth is
Yeah.
important. You need to have a fairly decent idea of all of the different products, different currencies, different interest rates, and then capture the best opportunity in whichever pair provides that to you. Whereas in India, if you are sort of a generalist and not a specialist in one particular thing, then it will be really difficult for you to do fairly well. So different environments across these places. Between London, Hong Kong, New York, Singapore, I've sort of worked in all of these different places. I think the markets have been fairly homogenized because talent move across fairly frequently, right? Working in Hong Kong, I had German colleagues, I had French colleagues, I had American, Canadian, Kiwi colleagues, etc. So it's a fairly multicultural team. And
Mm-hmm.
sitting in Hong Kong as well, you tend to trade sometimes more with the other centers than with the guy sitting next to you,
So
right?
would you say working in London or perhaps in Hong Kong would be similar kind of a trading experience?
It is quite similar. It is quite similar. Yes.
All right, makes sense. You were head of Asia FX Options Trading at Barclays in Singapore, leading a team across Singapore and London. What does moving from trader to team leader actually require of you that the trading desk never prepared you for?
Right. Well, I think as a team leader, the most important things that I think about effectively is ensuring that the output of the team is
Mm-hmm.
greater than the sum of individual contributions. Right. So that happens when you understand the strengths and weaknesses of your team, right, of each individual, and ensuring that each one gets to perform and deliver on using their strengths, and while doing that also they work on improving their weaknesses, right?
Mm-hmm.
As an individual, you're only focused on the challenges that you might encounter in the future, but as a
Mm-hmm.
team leader it's very important to anticipate what challenges people of sort of different seniorities in your team might encounter as well, right? So a new grad that has joined your team would encounter a completely different set of challenges than say a vice president and on the team who's looking to get promoted to a director or executive director, right?
Of course.
So
Mm-hmm.
ensure that you have regular conversations with them, remain as open with them to learn about their experiences, their potential challenges, and help them out with that. And then have them stay committed to delivering or outperforming on a regular basis, right? At the start of their careers, people tend to sort of silo themselves into thinking, okay, I am an analyst. Okay, these are the things, these are the only things I can
Mm-hmm.
do. I'm expected to perform up to this. But my message to them all is, why do you even think of yourself as an analyst? You are an employee on the floor. Try to say, why can't I perform at, say, a VP level, right? What's stopping me
Yeah.
from? If
Yeah.
you aim at that, then you can potentially get there. And the faster you do
Of
that,
course.
the more likely you are to get promoted and even more highly valued in the team. So those are the things that I focus on. I think my journey as a team leader in Hong Kong, Singapore, and here also has been an extremely rewarding experience for me. And I'm also so glad to say that the ex-colleagues who I've led in all of these places still maintain excellent relations with me despite having moved different firms and locations.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's a
That's
wonderful.
always a wonderful feeling.
It is, yes.
Great. And the message is clear, especially for juniors. If they're joining, they have to behave as if they have got the promotion in order to actually get the promotion.
Yes, exactly. So you need to always perform one or two levels above your sort of designated grade to be able to claim the promotion.
And personally, what do you enjoy more? Do you enjoy trading more, or do you enjoy leading a team?
That's an interesting question. I think there are interesting aspects for both of these,
Mm-hmm.
but having to get to do them both is great because, as I said, like on trading, when sometimes there are quiet markets, right? So for a month or so, for the last month in the summer markets, apart from equities, I think foreign exchange has been really quiet. So in such environments, it's great to sort of work on the team cohesion, ensuring that each person has different projects to work on as well, which would lead us to be a better team the next week, next month, next year, next decade, and overall leaving the team much better than what it was, say, 2 or 3 years earlier. So that's what I'm enjoying doing right now. But
Mm-hmm.
once the summer ends in, say, the end of August or early September, we expect a lot more volatility to come back into markets. So that's where I put the trading cap on even more and let the team sort of lead by itself.
Of course, of course. Again, going back to your transitions, you have moved from Mumbai to Hong Kong to Singapore to London. Each of those moves, they were a significant life decision as well as a career one. Which one was the hardest and why?
Right. So I'll take you one step back as well. So before this, I sort of started off as an intern in London, right?
Mm-hmm.
That again was a lovely phase. Unfortunately, there were certain sort of political decisions at the time because of which this couldn't get converted into an offer. So I started
Mm-hmm.
off in Mumbai, which was sort of home for me at the time with RBS. The move from Mumbai to Hong Kong happened because I got noticed by an MD in Hong Kong who was doing FX options trading, and he sort of
Okay.
led me to join the team. So it was sort of an upgrade in certain ways, right? In terms of
Yeah,
the
of course. Yeah.
breadth of
Mm-hmm.
things
Yeah.
I was doing, etc. Hong Kong to Singapore was more of a personal decision for family and a good opportunity there. I had established myself fairly well in Singapore, right? Sort of leading on a global basis, working with very smart people in an organization I respected. Moving from there to London was a bit more of a decision because I was moving my family, which is wife and kids, across halfway across the world. Moving from an already established sort of position into into a completely new market that I had not traded in, right? The tax rates were also different between Singapore and Hong Kong. So there's many different considerations when in this move. So I thought long and hard about this, but I think I have absolutely no regrets with the move. It's worked out much better than the best of my expectations, and
Mm-hmm.
good things remain on an upward trajectory from here.
Yeah, fingers crossed. And that's great to hear. And if you think about that move, now you've been here for 2 years. So, what would you say was the most important factor that drew you towards London from Singapore?
Right. So in my experience in Mumbai, Hong Kong, and Singapore, I was largely sort of focused on Asia related trading, right? So
Mm-hmm.
emerging Asia. And I'd sort of gained a certain level of expertise and reputation in this space. Now, I've always wanted to have a much broader sort of perspective on markets because you never know what aspect of market or what asset class or what single currency might be the biggest mover in the next year or the next 2 3 years, right? The broader your expertise, the more you are likely to be able to ride that wave. One really important element of trading that was missing from my sort of quiver of arrows was G10, right? So I wanted to sitting in Asia, you can trade G10, but the most of the volatility happens in London and New York, right? The afternoon and evening sessions. So that's something I really wanted to experience. And I believe London will almost certainly always remain the home of FX, just given its central location and history as well. So trading G10 FX in London, I think there's absolutely nothing like it. So in my move from Singapore to London, it was primarily because both for family reasons as well as also the fact that I get to trade exactly what I want to do in potentially the best center in the world for that.
Fair enough. And outside work and outside weather,
Yeah.
what is the one thing you would say has changed completely in London versus your time back in 2012?
Right. So in 2012, when I was here as an intern, it was obviously a fairly competitive internship scene out there, and everything was new. Right, the city was new to me. The work that I was doing, interning at two different desks, all of that was new to me.
Mm-hmm.
So there used to be a certain amount of pressure in terms of daily performance, what's to be done. It was also a change from sort of an academic career where I was very successful into a completely different sort of corporate setup where different rules worked, the expectations are different, etc. Right? Whereas now, so when I came back into a year in 2021 with Barclays, I was fairly well established. That was a short 6 month period anyway. But then when I came back here again in 2024, the work element has been in far more in control, right? So I know what's expected of me. I have a background of work behind me which sort of speaks for itself. So it becomes a lot easier in that sense, in the sense while you are expected to innovate and while you are expected to outperform, there is at least certain elements aren't new, right? So in that sense, you are able to enjoy work much more than maybe in your initial phases. So that's the work element. The weather has obviously been lovely, so that really helps your family. But the taking the pressure off work also allows you to live more outside of work, right? So something that I really enjoy here is traveling and also history. So I'm an absolute history buff. And I think there's no place in the world like London or the UK to be able to enjoy the history around you.
Mhm. You say you love traveling. Which are your top three destinations, holiday destinations?
Right. So I think, well, I have quite a few to be honest, ones I've really enjoyed, but places I've been to recently, I think Montenegro is excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Had a family trip down there last year and really enjoyed it. In terms of sort of traveling with your wife, I think Turkey was an amazing experience for us as well. Right, driving along the coast, the food is great, people are lovely, and Australia as well. It was a pleasant surprise. We really enjoyed our time in Australia.
Great. And in terms of work, how do you switch off from markets? A world which you also say that never closes. It's 24 by 5 in terms of your trading. How do you switch off?
Yeah, right. So I think it's eventually boiling down to realizing what's the most important thing in your life, right? At this
Mm-hmm.
stage of my life, I think family absolutely comes first. There is no doubt over there. So when I'm off work, obviously the responsibility of ensuring that the team does well and the bank does well does still stay with you, but primary focus will always remain on family outside of work, family and their growth and development. It really helps that I have a very capable team in London, New York, and Singapore that sort of carries on the work if and when I'm not sort of working on markets. But
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
they give me a lot of confidence in me not having to sort of really oversee markets outside of market hours. And I think the one of the things I really enjoy about trading is that while work is really hectic from Monday to Friday, and you really need to be glued into market happenings on a very regular basis. Outside of market hours, and more importantly on weekends, there's not all that much you can do. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So while you can take a few minutes or maybe an hour or so to plan for the next week, those are more related to sort of team growth and potential things that you can do, but they're not very, very, very trade specific.
Fair
Right. So
enough.
you don't need to sort of work on presentations and all of these other aspects over the weekend. So you can just be yourself.
So having a clear distinction between work and life makes a big difference.
It does make a big difference. It gives you a clear downtime. Now it's up to different people on how you use it. Either you can use it for your hobbies, you can spend time with family, you can work more if you want to, but you are not required to in that period. So it's good downtime, and it leaves you energized into Monday.
You talk about hobbies. What's your biggest hobby?
Well, I don't have one per se, but I really enjoy reading. Reading has been something that I've really enjoyed from childhood.
Hmm.
Even when I was a child, when I was having my meals, I would almost always have a book with me that I was reading. Parents didn't like it as much, but I wouldn't really listen to them. So reading has been with me from the absolute earliest memories of childhood. These days, when you have so many responsibilities, you don't get as much time to read. But here, then again, you come across really nice books that stay with you for quite a few years.
And if you were to pick one book that you could take on your holiday, which one would that be?
Well, I've last year I read this book called 1929, which talks about the Great Depression in the U.S.
Hmm.
I think it is a fantastic read, and it's not very market terminology heavy, right? So anyone can read it. It just talks about it. Firstly, it gives you a glimpse into an era that otherwise you don't really read about or can view on movies, right? So most of the American movies from the earlier times that you see are more maybe much like 1950s, 1970s, 1980s. But going back to the 1920s, where bankers are expecting markets to outperform because of productivity increase on the invention of mixers, right?
Yeah.
And tiny
Yeah.
instruments like that, right? A fridge
Yeah.
invented. They're like, wow, this is a great increase in productivity. And we talk about AI right now, right? And computers, say maybe 20 years ago. It's quite fascinating. That gives you an insight into that day and age, right? Come across names like the great JP Morgan, right, who was a central figure in banking at the time. So I've really enjoyed reading that book, and it also talks about the whole fear and greed element and how the panic buying eventually led into a crash that lasted for three plus years.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, it's
Interesting.
a very inspiring book overall.
Indeed. Very inspiring. What is the one thing that you are genuinely proud of, which has nothing to do with a trade or pain?
Right. Okay. This is a very loaded question. But I think I'm very proud of my family, right? In
Hmm.
the sense, I have a wonderful wife that I really like spending time with. Two young kids that are effectively like tiny AI models for us, right? In the sense that they consume so much sort of information from us, and they process it in a fully different way, and they sort of surprise us on a daily basis or a weekly
I
basis.
can completely relate with that.
Yeah, in terms of how they've processed that information and how that is, and the sort of innovations they come up with on that, right? So that's something that really endears me, and something that I think I'm fairly proud of.
Great. And where can people find you if they want to follow your thinking or get in touch?
I think these days social media is probably the easiest way. So I'm always open on LinkedIn. I have my details there. So I'm very happy for if anyone has anything specific to discuss, they can reach out to me via those coordinates.
Perfect. We are moving to the last section of our podcast,
Hmm.
which is rapid fire.
Right.
It's quite simple. First, honest answer, no elaboration, straightforward. Ready? Great. Trading or leading a trading team? Which one do you prefer?
I like leading a trading team.
One asset class excluding FX options if you had to trade for the rest of your career.
Equities.
Mumbai, Hong Kong, Singapore, London. Where is home?
London.
Most overrated thing about working at a bulge bracket trading desk.
I'd say focus on bonuses.
Interesting. The market event in your career that taught you the most? One line.
COVID, no doubt about it.
Okay. IIT Bombay or IIM Calcutta? Which shaped you more?
IIT Bombay.
Pedigree or proof of work? Which opens more doors in finance?
First few years pedigrees, otherwise proof of work.
Again, about cities Mumbai, Hong Kong, Singapore, London. Which is the best city for living?
I still think London.
And best city for trading?
Again, London.
Thing you miss most about Singapore?
The access to so many different countries close by. So yeah, I miss that.
Best thing about London you did not expect when you moved back?
Good weather.
Best piece of advice you ever received about markets?
Stay humble. Times change.
hmm Finally, what does Sagar do on a Sunday morning in London that has nothing to do with markets?
Spend time with family and sometimes hope the day that goes on longer and longer.
Great. It was wonderful to have you. Sagar, I want to say something that I don't think I've said out loud before, even though we have had versions of this conversation 100 times. 14 years across 4 cities, IIT Bombay, IIM Calcutta, Mumbai, Hong Kong, Singapore, London. A trading career which has been built on making good decisions when the information is incomplete. The stakes are real and the clock is running. The real edge you have built isn't in the positions you have taken, it's in how you think. And in an industry that often rewards speed over depth, that is genuinely rare. For anyone listening who wants to follow Sagar's thinking on markets, risk, and careers, his details are going to be in the show notes. If you enjoyed this episode of M&A Station, please subscribe either on Spotify, YouTube, or Apple Podcasts and share it with one person who would get something from it. I am Himanshu Singh. See you in the next one.
Thank you, Himanshu.